एक मिनट, अभी मैं कॉल बैक। हाँ,
Good evening, all of you.
Good evening, ma'am.
Yeah. Okay. We were doing revision of the French Revolution, right? And let us resume French Revolution, or you all want me to do some other chapter? Hello.
Yes, ma'am.
We will do French. We were doing French Revolution. We will continue that. Okay. So yeah. So we had done what was the immediate cause, and then now we are going to do the outbreak of the French Revolution. Okay, we did directory rules, France. The reign of terror we have already done. We spoke about Robespierre, how Robespierre's reign was full of terror. Okay, and he would you would say guillotine everyone who went against him, even if that person is of his own um party. Okay, so after this, after Robespierre, in the end, Robespierre was himself convicted in July 1794, and he too was sent to guillotine. Next, we talk about the directory rules of France. Can somebody read this for me? Adavit? Ad, uh, Advait, please read
Yes, ma'am.
directory rules. Yes, please.
The fall of the Jacobin government allowed the wealthier middle classes to seize power. A new constitution was introduced which denied to the vote to non-property sections of society. It provided for two elected legislative councils. These then appointed a directory and executive made up of 5 members. This was meant as safeguard against the concentration of power in one man executive as under the Jacobins. However, the directors often clashed with the legislative councils, who then sought to dismiss them. The political instability of the director paved the way for the rise of military dictator Napoleon Bonaparte. Through
Bonaparte.
Bonaparte. Through all these changes in the form of government, the ideals of the freedom of equality before the law of fraternity remained inspiring ideals that motivated political movements in France and the rest of the Europe during the following century.
Okay. Next, we come. Did women have a revolution? Okay, now the women played a very important, vital role in the revolution. Let's read about this. Continue reading, please.
Yes, ma'am. From the very beginning, women were active participants in the events, which brought up so many important changes in French society. They hoped that their involvement would pressurize the revolutionary government to introduce measures to improve their lives. Most women of the third estate had to work for a living. They worked as seamstress or laundresses, sold flowers, fruits, and vegetables at the market, or were employed as domestic servants in the house of prosperous people. Most women did not have access to education or job training. Only daughters of nobles or wealthier members of the third estate could study at a convent, after which their family arranged a marriage for them. Working women had also to care for their families, that is, cook, fetch water, queue up for bread, and look after their children. Their wages were lower than those of men. In order to discuss the voice, their interests women started their own political clubs and newspapers. About 60 women's clubs came up in different French cities. The Society of Revolutionary and Republican Women was the most famous of them. So should I continue?
Yeah, wait. Let me explain about this. So let's talk about women. So let me take you to my notes. Okay, so now from the very beginning, women were very active in the French Revolution. In fact, they supported the men so much that it was kind of a revolution led by the women. So, but what was the plight of the women? They were in a very, you can say, pathetic plight. Okay, and their wages were also lower than, even if they did the same job like that of a man, yet they were paid less. Okay, now you read that they worked as waitresses and they worked as laundresses, and they also, even if they their main demand, and they never enjoyed any political rights. They never enjoyed no political rights. Okay, and some laws introduced to improve the position of women, and they still they kept on struggling, and it was finally in 1946 that the women in France won the right to vote. So it took okay. I'm really sorry about that. So we were talking about women's revolution. So women were disappointed that the constitution in 1791 reduced them to passive citizens. Okay, and they had no right. They demanded the right to vote, to be elected into the assembly, and to hold political office. These were the demands that they wanted: right to vote, elected to the assembly, and hold for political office. But they were denied by all this. The revolutionary government did introduce laws that helped improve the lives of the women. And what was it that they did for the women? That was, you can just study by these bullets. By creation of state schools, schooling was made compulsory for girls. Okay, schooling was made compulsory. Their fathers could no longer force them into marriages. Before, what used to happen, the father used to be responsible for the girl, and he would marry off the daughter wherever he wished. So now this was not there. There was also the wish of the girl whom she wants to marry, and divorce was made legal in case any woman fell into a abusive marriage. There was a clause for divorce given for the women. Now women could also now train for job. They could get a training like mechanical training and other electronic also. And for job, they could become artists or run small businesses. So these are the four bullets that you should remember for what the women women found. Okay. Uh, Next comes the abolition of slavery. Let me see what is there in the book. Okay. Somebody read. Please read for me.
Should I?
Yeah, you read. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. One of the most revolutionary social reforms of the Jacobin regime was the abolition of slavery in the French colonies. The colonies in the Caribbean Martinique, Guadeloupe, and San Domingo were important suppliers of commodities such as tobacco, indigo, sugar, and coffee. But the reluctance of Europeans to go and work in distant and unfamiliar lands meant a shortage of labor on the plantations. So this was made by a triangular slave trade between Europe, Africa, and the Americas. The slave trade began in 17th century. From French merchants sailed from the ports of Bordeaux or Nantes to African coast, where they brought slaves from local chieftains. Branded and shackled, the slaves were packed tightly into the ships for 3-month-long voyages across the Atlantic to the Caribbean. There they were sold to plantation owners. The exploitation of slave labor made it possible to meet the growing demand in European markets for sugar, coffee, and indigo. Port cities like Bordeaux and Nantes owed their economic prosperity to the flourishing slave trade. Throughout the 18th century, there was a little criticism of slavery in France. The National Assembly held long debates about whether the rights of man should be extended to all French subjects, including. Can you
Yeah.
scroll?
Yeah. Including.
Including those in the colonies, but it did not pass any laws, fearing opposition from businessmen whose incomes depended on the slave trade. It was finally the convention which in 1794 legislated to free all slaves in French overseas possessions. This, however, turned out to be a short term measure. 10 years later, Napoleon reintroduced slavery. Plantation owners understood their freedom as including the right to enslave African Negroes in pursuit of their economic interests. Slavery was finally abolished in French colonies in 1848.
Yeah, just remember this year, in 1848, uh, uh, slavery was abolished. Okay, let's continue with this. Let me give you the notes. Okay, so the unwillingness of Europeans to go to work in the colonies because they did not want to work, so they brought for them slaves to work for them in the as important suppliers of commodities such as tobacco, indigo, sugar, and coffee. So this created a shortage of labor in the plantations. Thus, the slave trade began in the 17th century. Now, this was a very flourishing industry. Okay. Now, French merchants sailed from their ports to the African coast where they bought slaves from local chieftains, branded and shackled them. Branded means they kind of, like, you know how you put a logo, you heat up a brass die and then they they used to brand the slave on their backs or you can say on their hand. Okay, so they were branded and they were shackled. I mean, they were stuffed like animals into ships. The slaves were packed tightly into the ship for the 3-month long voyage. It used to be three very long and tiring voyage across the Atlantic to the Caribbean. So these plantations were mostly in the Caribbean. So there they were sold to plantation owners. The exploitation of slave labor made it possible to meet the growing demand in Europe, make markets for sugar, coffee, and indigo. So the National Assembly held among debates. So you can see when when there was a revolution. So those who were, like I told you, it was a middle class who laid down the constitution of the French Revolution. But these middle class, they were financed by these plantation owners. So this was the reason that the revolutionaries also could not oppose this slave trade because they were being financed by the plantation owners. Understand? So, the National Assembly held long debates about whether the rights of the man should be extended to all French subjects, including those in the colonies. But it did not pass any law fearing opposition from businessmen whose income depended on the slave trade. Okay. So, Jacobin's regime in 1794 abolished slavery in the French colonies. However, so Jacobins had abolished in 1794, but when Napoleon came, Napoleon was he reintroduced slavery. 10 years later, Napoleon reintroduced slavery, and now slavery was finally abolished in 1848. Okay, now the democratic rights we enjoy today, whose origins could be traced to the French Revolution. So we can trace the origins of the following democratic rights we enjoy today to the French Revolution. That is the right to equality before law, freedom of speech and expression, right against exploitation, and right to justice. These four rights that we enjoy, that was this laid by the democratic rights in the French Revolution. Okay, now let's next we are going to talk about legacy of the French Revolution. Okay. Okay, somebody read, please.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Can politics change the clothes people wear, the language they speak, or the books they read? The years following 1789 in France saw many such changes in the lives of men, women, and children. The revolutionary governments took it upon themselves to pass laws that would translate the ideals of liberty and equality into everyday practice. One important law that came into effect soon after the storming of the Bastille in the summer of 1789 was the abolition of censorship. In the old regime, all written material and cultural activities, books, newspapers, plays, could be published or performed only after they had been approved by the censors of the king. Now, the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen proclaimed freedom of speech and expressions to be a natural right. Newspapers, pamphlets, books, and printed pictures flooded the towns of France from where they traveled rapidly into the countryside. They all described and discussed the events and changes taking place in the France. Freedom of the press also meant that opposing views of events could be expressed. Each side each side sought to convince the other of his position through the medium of print. Plays, songs, and festive processions attracted large number of people. This was one way that they could grasp and identify with ideas such as liberty or justice that the political philosophers wrote about at length in texts which only a handful of educated people could read.
Okay, please continue.
So from conclusion,
Yeah.
in 1804, Napoleon
Bonaparte.
Bonaparte,
Bonaparte. Okay. It will
Bonaparte,
be easy for you to remember.
okay, ma'am. Bonaparte crowned himself Emperor of France. He set out to conquer neighboring European countries, dispossessing dynasties and creating kingdoms where he placed members of his family. Napoleon saw his role as a modernizer of Europe. He introduced many laws such as protection of private property and a uniform system of weights and measures provided by the decimal system. Initially, many saw Napoleon as liberator who would bring freedom for the people. But soon the Napoleonic armies came to be viewed everywhere as an invading force. He was finally defeated at Waterloo in 1815. Many of his laws to other many of his laws many of his measures that carried the revolutionary idea of liberty and modern laws to other parts of the Europe had an impact on people long after Napoleon had left. The ideas of liberty and democratic rights were the most important legacy of the French Revolution. Thus, these spread from France to the rest of the Europe during the 19th century, where the feudal systems were abolished. Colonized peoples revoked the idea of freedom from bondage into their movements to create a sovereign nation
Sovereign.
state.
Okay.
Sovereign nation state. Tipu Sultan and Ram Mohan Roy are two examples of individuals who responded to the ideas coming from revolutionary France.
Okay. So this is how. Let's talk about a little bit about Napoleon. Okay, so ideas of liberty and democratic rights were most important legacy of the French Revolution. The main thing was ideas of liberty and democratic rights that we even enjoy today. This is the legacy of the French Revolution. These spread from France to the rest of the Europe during the 19th century, where feudal system were abolished. Okay, and means there was no king and queen and all that. And later these ideas were adopted by Indian revolutionary strugglers like Tipu Sultan and Ram Mohan Roy. So this was some notes that are there, and okay, now you can, if you want, I will send you these question and answer, or if you want, we will do it now because we have a few time, about 4 minutes, 4 to 5 minutes. So here it is. If you have any questions, any special questions you want for me to revise um, uh, for your revision, just let me know.
Like this first answer is from the textbook only.
It is from the text. It is not from the textbook, but I will send you this. You can revise it. What was the outbreak of revolutionary? Why did they? The first thing is, why did they start? Why did they start? Why did they want a revolution? So what happened here? So when this is the instance, let me read it out to you. When King Louis was appointed as a king, okay, now he found empty treasury. Long years of why was the treasury empty? Because before there was a long years of war. Why was they war? Because the king believed in expanding their kingdom. So for expanding, they wanted to fight. So and the war led to draining of the financial resources. So on top of this, there was a cost of maintaining the extravagant court. Every day they used to, every evening they used to have a lavish party. They had an extravagant style of living. So all this had drained out their treasuries. So France had helped the 13th American colonies gain their independence from their common enemy Britain. So this was the reason for the war. The war added more than a billion livers. It is livers, not lives. Livers. Livers. This is the currency used at that time. To debt that had already risen to more than 2 billion livers. Lenders who gave credit began to charge 10% interest on loans. 10%. Okay, so the French government had to spend an increasing percentage of its budget on interest payment alone. To meet its regular expenses, such as cost of maintaining an army, the court, the government officers, and universities were increasingly becoming difficult. So this, what was the solution to this problem? The only solution was raising taxes, and the taxes were paid by the third state, that was the common man. Okay, so because the French society was divided into three states and only the third state had to pay taxes, the first and the second state did not pay any taxes, they received the taxes. Okay, the population of France was also growing massively. Now they had to pay more tax, and also because the population was growing, there was shortage of food. So production of grain could not keep pace with the demand. So the price of bread, which was the staple diet of the majority, rose rapidly because there was less food and there was a bad harvest. So this led to the increase of price of bread that and food. So this led to subsistence. Uh, uh, okay, now this led to to starvation, and the uh, people began to like starve. So most
Ma'am,
people were employed as laborers in workshops whose owners fixed their wages. So the prices went up, but the wages did not rise. But the wages did not keep pace with the rise in prices. Yes, Advait, you have to say something?
ma'am, the last point, like it cannot keep pace with the population and the food. So we can write that these points for substances crisis.
Subsistence crisis. This is also the meaning. If you get a word, no, sure, if you get a question, short note on subsistence crisis, you have to say the same. Okay.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay, fine. So the second one is, which groups of French society benefited from the revolution? Which groups were forced to relinquish power? Which society? I will send you this. It is talking about the society. You have to talk about the three states. Okay. Okay. The democratic rights. This is the democratic rights. The freedom of speech. I think I had sent this earlier also, but I will send it again today. Okay. If you all, is there any question that you all want to ask me? Then I will answer. I will want to make my leave earlier today. Anybody has any question?
Actually, ma'am, we are means like I'm having exam social on Saturday, the coming Saturday.
Coming Saturday. So what chapters you have? You have French Revolution and
French Revolution from history and from geography chapter 1, economics chapter 1 and democratic politics chapter 1.
okay, okay. So I think we did chapter 1 of geography also. What was this chapter? Let me see. Give me the name of the chapter.
Physical features of India.
Okay, I think we did not do that, right? So
Sorry, ma'am.
physical features of India.
India,
Yeah, we
India
did not.
size and location. Sorry, ma'am. It was India
Which one?
size and location.
India size and location. Okay.
Yes,
I'll
yes.
do one thing. I'll send this question and answers of India size and location also. And I will send French Revolution, question and answers. And which chapter you have?
In economics chapter 1 and democratic politics chapter 1
What is the name of the chapter 1?
of DP, like democratic politics. Yes, ma'am.
Mm. Yeah, democratic rights, right?
Why democracy
Why
chapter
is
1.
what is democracy? What is democracy? Why
Why
democracy? Okay, fine.
democracy.
I'll send this one also with you. Fine. Just give me tonight. I will send it to you, or early morning. I will send it to you tomorrow.
Okay,
Fine.
ma'am.
Okay then. Okay. Bye. Good night. Good night, all of you.